Audience.
Lance Peterson, PAG. Rick Ellis, PAG RTA. Oh, Jeremy Moore, ADOT. Doug Moser, ADOT. Preston Laughlin, PAG RTA.
Amy Down, PAG.
Dustin Fitzpatrick, PAG.
Natalie Sheff, Pima County Department of Environmental Quality.
Paul Casertano, Pima County Department of Transportation.
Catherine Skinner, Pima County Transportation.
Jamie Brown with PAG.
Isa Rodriguez, PAG.
Jeanette Wren, PAG.
Sam Credio, City of Tucson, and we'll go back to the end of the.
Oh, nice and handsome. ADOT.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now let's go ahead to the folks that we have online. I'll go ahead and call your name, and if you could introduce yourself. We'll start out with Dan.
Town of Marana.
Galavale.
Morning, this is Nalo Tamasarita.
Thank you. Mark.
Mark Novak. Sorry. Mark Novak, University of Arizona.
And Mark Hoffman.
Good morning, Mark Hoffman, ADOT Planning.
Thanks, Mark. Mike.
Mike Iswell from Kinley Horn.
Thanks, Mike. Let's see, we have Dan Gabal.
Hi, good morning. Dan Gabbio with Federal Highways.
Thanks, Dan. David Mitchell.
Good morning, David Mitchell, PAG.
Thanks, David. David Zinda.
Good morning, David Zinda, Pima Association of Governments.
David Davida.
Good morning, Davida Mueller, Suntran.
Thank you, Davida. Jasmine.
Jasmine Saavedra, PAG.
Thank you, Jasmine. Sean. Sean Lowry. Okay. Josue.
Josue Licea, City of South Tucson, present.
Thanks, Josue. And Patricia.
Good morning, everyone. This is Patricia Pavlo with the Tohono O'odham Nation.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online that I didn't call on? All right, hearing none, we'll go to item 2, in-kind reporting. Jeanette Duren.
Great. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. It collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know before the end of the meeting. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable on the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. ISA has sent the sign-in sheet around. Make sure you sign it and record your hours. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeanette. We will move on to item 3, approval of the March 20, 2024 meeting summary. Have you all had a chance to review it? Do you have any comments or questions before I ask for a motion to approve? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Sure.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'll abstain because I wasn't here last
I will
meeting.
also abstain. I was also not here.
Who else abstained?
Me.
Okay, so we have 2 abstentions, Catherine and Natalie. All right, motion passes. Thank you very much. Move on to item 4, review and recommend approval of the draft PAG fiscal year 2025, fiscal year 2029 Transportation Improvement Program TIP. Mr. Jamie Brown.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to open this item for discussion and possible action. So We've been bringing this item forward, so there's been a lot of information we've covered. I'm not going to go through all of that today, but happy to take questions about things we've covered in the past. Do want to start just with a glimpse at our anticipated schedule. So you can see we're grayed out items in the past, and we're down towards the bottom. We're working towards the May Regional Council meeting, where we would have a public hearing and request approval of the fiscal year 2025 through 2029 TIP document. I'll go through those other items in a little more detail later on in the slides. So we had our last meeting of the TPC on March 20th, right in the middle of when we were also convening TIP open houses, which is a typical part of our process, our public engagement process, where we provide the public the opportunity to provide input on the draft project list and maps, and also engage in other discussions about transportation priorities and address questions. These were promoted through a variety of media outlets and channels. We held them at 3 locations, and we also provided a virtual option. We had about 52 attendees, and with the full draft document that we shared with the TPC on March 28th, we also shared a summary of the comments that we received at these TIP open house events. I want to thank all of the TPC representatives and members of their staffs for their attendance at these open houses. We get questions related to the TIP project list, but often we get questions just about what's happening on other non-TIP related projects in the jurisdiction. So it's really helpful to have your representation at those meetings. I want to say that the promotions were not only in English, but also in Spanish for these TIP open houses. We had a Spanish language speaker at all of the TIP open houses, which was announced at the very beginning of each of these. And we also covered the Title VI requirements as part of our notice to the public. Next slide, please. So, like I mentioned, we did share the preliminary draft of the TIP document with the TPC on March 28th. Please recall that at the March 20th meeting, the TPC did recommend approval of the draft project list. So thank you for that support. We did receive comments on the draft TIP document, and we provided what we had received last week within the packet for TPC. Please note, we did receive some comments yesterday morning from the city of Tucson, and we can cover those as requested this morning. We also received a very minor comment from ADOT to the project list just this morning, actually, is requesting that we increase the funding on the Keno Country Club TI project by $1,000. I think it's a rounding issue. It's a very minor adjustment to the project list just to cover rounding. And Mark is on the line if anybody has questions about that. But in terms of the comments that we responded to, here are several that are described in the packet with our responses. So these comments cover opportunities for protected populations to be engaged in the process, the rationale for the removal of the TIP reserve list, incorporating equity considerations as part of project selection, ADOT's recommendation to remove OWP items from the TIP, and project-specific questions. Again, these are just examples of the comments we received. They're all in your packet, except for the ones that we received just yesterday and the one that I mentioned this morning. So upcoming dates, did want to cover this in a little more detail. So depending on the outcome of today's meeting, we are anticipating starting the 30-day public comment period on Friday. We will be asking management committee to recommend approval of the draft TIP at the May 8th meeting. May 16th is really the last, around that time, really the last practical opportunity for committee members to suggest minor changes to the draft TIP. That's 1 week prior to the posting of the regional council agenda. And then May 20th, we'll have completed the 30-day public comment period, review public comments, and share responses with the regional council. And then May 30th, again, we'll have a public hearing and request for approval of the draft of the TIP. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my overview. Happy to go into any detail and discuss this.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. We'll open it up to questions, comments. This is an action item, correct? So we will be looking for action at the end of this discussion, but first I'll open it up for any questions or comments from the committee.
Hey, I have a
Yes, go, Kathy.
question. At the recent RTA board meeting, reference was made to that we've put together the TIP project list, thanks to the committee, which was nice. And it was mentioned that the RTA one projects are fully funded now, with the exception for the 4 carryover. We didn't actually do any program of RTA funding, to my recollection. So I thought there were a number of projects from RTA one that are still have funding gaps. Can you let us know what the status are? All the projects funded at this point, or for the TIP, there's still gaps in funding to deliver?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Skinner, thank you for that question. So my understanding is that through FY 25 through 29, using the regional STBG and HERF sources, we were able to close the gap on all the RTA one projects. And I believe we all also were able to meet that statutory requirement of making sure that those projects that had not initiated a phase will be doing so prior to the conclusion of RTA one by July 1st, 2026. You're correct that we did not program beyond into 25 through 29 the RTA funding. As you all know, the available RTA is determined on an annual basis based on the RTA budget. And so we're developing the RTA budget for FY 25 as we speak. We'll be bringing that to the RTA board at an upcoming meeting, either the special meeting or the May 30th meeting. At that time, we'll know how much we would have available to program in FY 25 of RTA. But I think the comment maybe goes back to the delta in terms of what appears to be the gap on that worksheet from December, and then the anticipated revenue collections over the next 2 fiscal years until the conclusion of RTA. So I think maybe that comment sort of is suggesting that we should be able to fully fund all of these projects in anticipation of those RTA revenues. But you're correct, we did not actually program those yet, and we can't really do so until the RTA annual budget process is complete each year.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the TIP project list we have in front of us does not show adequate funding to deliver the RTA one projects at this time, but that'll be programmed at a later date with future revenues.
That is correct. That is my understanding.
Okay.
Questions? Fine. Okay, here are no other questions or comments. I do know that comments or responses to comments were provided in the packet. I know we did get you our comments a little bit late. I took a look at them this morning, and were there any in particular you needed to address at this meeting, Jamie, before we move on to action?
Yeah, I'm happy to go through those. There are a few that most of the comments that we received from the city of Tucson are corrections, adjustments to text on the transit, in the transit chapter. So those seem like comments or suggestions we can make. There was a comment about showing the fiscal year 24 ending balance for RTA. And so our preliminary response is we don't really have that number yet. We won't until the end of the fiscal year. So we don't really have that to show. Perf 12.6, we handled through a cash flow process this time, which is why we showed FY 24 at the top of that table. The other comment we received from the city of Tucson had to do with using the Eller projections from 2022 for that fiscal constraint table, table 7. And our response is that, our preliminary response is that, as we've talked about at previous meetings, we had to kind of create an endpoint for all project cost estimates as well as funding projections in the fall. And so that's why we're continuing to use that FY 22 or the 22 Eller projections for this process. So it's just a snapshot in time. And then there was a question about or comment about STBG. And the comment is, Table 3 shows the total projected STBG distributions, but only the STBG greater than 200,000 projections appear to be included in the fiscal constraint table. Aren't there population bands in the PAG region outside the greater than 200,000? Why isn't the full amount included in the fiscal constraint table? So we've gone into great detail on this. This is the first tip where we're required to adhere to the apportionments of the STBG by population band. So we do have a detailed response below fiscal constraint table 7 about why it's very difficult for us to project the lower population band amounts. We're using 100% of our obligation authority for the greater than 200,000 STBG. So that's easy to project, but the full apportionments that we get of STBG are subject to change. We've even seen some changes in the last few months with rebalancing from the 2020 census. The urban areas were adjusted, and so we received a reduction in our STBG. So that's why we're not able to show all of the STBG. We show the total STBG in table 3 in appendix 2. So we show the total, but we don't show the breakdown of all the smaller population bands, just the greater than 200,000. And then the rest of the questions and comments are minor changes, corrections. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that, Jim. All right, anyone else? Yeah,
Just
go ahead.
one last question. So the decision to not list the OWP work in the tip, we all understand that why that's happened. And it's at the last meeting, we had discussed how that will affect the fiscal constraint and documenting that those regional funds are essentially drawn against for the purposes of the OWP activities and how that would be covered within the tip. And I believe the answer was effectively it would be included in the narrative. And I'm not sure that I ever really found that. So we submitted a comment related to that. Did I miss that? Is it not covered in the narrative because it doesn't have to be, or what am I missing here, I guess?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Casartano, maybe I misunderstood your request or your comment about the narrative. We did include below table 7 a detailed discussion about the different population bands of STBG. So maybe I thought we were addressing that way, but it sounds like you were looking for something different.
Yeah, I think, the conversation that we had with Mark and yourself at the last meeting was if we have, OWP activities that essentially draw against the regional STBG and other fund sources, yet we don't show that in the tip, how do we follow the bouncing ball of there's, 5 million less in the total STBG because some of that is being used in the OWP? And the answer was, well, we'll just describe that in the narrative and we'll say reference the OWP for those regional funds that are documented in that contractual agreement. So that's fine. It's not a showstopper necessarily. I guess I was just looking for something that I didn't end up finding what I was expecting to find.
Okay, thank you for that comment.
All right, anyone else? Anyone online have any comments or have your hand raised?
I'm just gonna ask one more question on the plane of the population band. So there's about 5.4 million between what we can program with 200,000 and greater, what our apportionment is. So 4.1 or so is used, I think, in the OWP. So what is left over and where is that being applied? Math would tell me there's 1.3, but I don't know if that's the percentage because of the obligation authority or we're going to program that in a future year. What is the plan for that?
Yeah, thank you. And I think David Zind is on the line to maybe provide more information on that. Thank you, Ms. Skinner. So as we've described previously, so as we see available lower population band STBG that is available for programming outside of what is used for the OWP in table 1, we can issue a call for projects. And we did just that with the regional transportation alternatives grants. So we made available SDBG and 2 lower population bands. And I'll turn it over to David. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Jamie. I don't think I have too much else to add. It depends from year to year, depending on that obligation limitation, as well as what other projects we're programming. And so that balance can be used in terms to pay for that OA. Jamie, you're right in saying that a lot of it was used and consumed with RTAG as well. And we do have some flexibility with ADOT for these very small amount of money to kind of move it over time. And we did that with this recent RTAG award to help jurisdictions not have to use these funds like tomorrow, but instead in a couple of years. So there's some movement of that funding across time, which can also make it a little bit more confusing to try to give that very robust, intuitive accounting at a high level. So we are constantly in communication with ADOT, making sure that no funding is lost to the region and trying to do what is best for our member jurisdictions to use whatever funding is left there.
Anyone else? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval of the draft tag fiscal year 25 through 29 tip.
I'll move that. I would like to make the note that the RTA 1 projects as listed in the tip are not fully funded at this time.
Moved by Catherine. Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion besides the note that Catherine added?
Does it need to be noted that the RTA projects aren't fully funded at this time?
I'm not sure that it'll be clear to the next committee up if we in our motion don't explicitly say there's a gap in funding. That's the message that we're able to provide to them is through our legal action. That was my thought in putting it there.
So the motion is that we're recommending approval of this draft tip with the note that the RTA 1 projects are not fully funded within the tip.
Yeah, if we wanted to change it, that funding gap will be addressed on an annual basis by the RTA board. But I just think it's important that we note explicitly that we have projects that are not fully funded at this time.
And that's on the tip in the first 2 years. I mean, all projects are not fully funded until the next step cycle. So we don't get ahead of that.
Right.
The Carlton is just making a know that these projects are not fully funded. Understood. Okay, when the next step cycle comes, more money is available.
That's not how they're being programmed, though. I mean, that's traditionally how it happens. We're not putting RTA funds on these projects. So at this level, we can never realize full funding because that'll only happen through the RTA board annual budgeting process, is my understanding. So I think it's important that we acknowledge that if this body, we're only programming 12-6 and STBG, which we fully put towards the RTA 1 because it's our goal to get these delivered. I mean, I'm all on board with that. But right now, they're not fully funded and there's action that needs to be taken by the other committees to make these projects constructible.
Jose, that was your understanding? Yeah. You're good with that? Okay. Any other comments or discussion? All right, hearing none, then we'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Very much, David. We will move on to item 5, which is review and recommend approval of fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2026 TAG Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 2022.110. Amy Brown and/or Adam Ledford. There's Adam.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Formal Amendment 2022.110 reflects movements of HERF regional funding across 3 City of Tucson sponsored projects in fiscal year 2024. Last fall, adjustments to HERF for fiscal year 2024 were made on these projects to balance funding across fiscal years as a part of the RPA roadway element worksheet that was endorsed by the TIP subcommittee in December. With TPC recommending approval of the draft fiscal year 2025 through 2029 TIP project list at last month's meeting, the corresponding adjustments to fiscal year 24 need to be reflected in the current fiscal year 2022 to 2026 TIP. The proposed draft tip amendment was shared with City of Tucson staff for concurrence prior to adding this information to the TPC packet. We're asking this committee for recommendation for approval and are happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Adam. Any questions or comments on this item? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval. Motion?
So moved.
Second by Catherine, second by Jose. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Adam. All right, we will move on to item 6. State Strategic Highway Safety Plan and Alternative Transportation Safety Plan update. Mark Hoffman.
Okay, Mr. Chair, committee members, the ADOT project team requested that we share this presentation with the committee to provide an update on how these important plans are being updated. So will you advance the slides for me? Okay, very good. So under this presentation, for the 2024 Arizona Strategic Highway Safety Plan and the Active Transportation Safety Action Plan update, we'll quickly cover some traffic safety trends, an overview of both projects that are being concurrently updated, public and stakeholder involvement, next steps, and then if there's any questions. So next slide. So traffic safety trends, next slide, please. So this graph shows traffic fatalities on all Arizona roads between 1998 and 2022, and it shows there's a 70% increase in traffic fatalities since 2010. So not the right direction that we want to go. Next slide. So likewise on the vulnerable road user fatalities in Arizona for bicyclists and pedestrians, same thing from 1998 to 2022 is a 110% increase in those fatalities. So it these graphs just are impetus for us to continually update these plans to develop a plan on how we're going to improve safety. So next slide. We'll go into the overview of both projects. Next slide. So first up, the Strategic Highway Safety Plan overview. The purpose is to establish a framework for Arizona traffic safety partners to reduce fatalities and serious injuries on Arizona roadways by developing a series of strategies and actions. It'd be a policy document, and it's required to be updated every 5 years. The last one was updated in 2019, and that one was called the Strategic Traffic Safety Plan. And then this one's going to be updated and completed in October of this year and be called the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Next slide. So the vision for the SHSP is creating a shared responsibility so everyone arrives safely home. We all have an important role to play in improving the safety of all users of the transportation system. The plan is to reduce life-altering traffic crashes. Those life-altering are those fatal and serious injuries that have a much greater impact on those involved in those crashes, and want to reduce it by 20% by 2030, and that's consistent with the governor's statewide goal for safety. And then the emphasis areas for the SHSP is going to be human behavior, includes the speed impaired, distracted driving, the intersections, lane departures, the vulnerable road users, and then also tribal. So next slide. So switching to the active transportation safety action plan overview. So this is going to build on the pedestrian and bicyclist safety action plans previously completed, and then also the vulnerable road user safety assessment that was completed in 2023. And then the ATSAP will include the development of projects and costs for pedestrian and bicycle improvements on the state highway system only. It'll integrate the strategic highway safety plan, inform future vulnerable road user safety assessments, and SHSP updates, and also be completed by October of this year. So as far as the project teams on the ADOT traffic safety side, Daniel Oldham is the project manager for the SHSP. Kerry Wilcoxon, he has accepted another position, so I think we're gonna have a new state traffic safety engineer appointed. So there may be a change there. And then on the active transportation safety action plan side, that's managed by the ADOT multimodal planning division. Elaine Mariel is our active transportation program manager, and then also Clem Lagaki, who's our planning program manager for the ATSAP. And then the consultant team working on both projects is Kimley Horn is the lead, along with WSP and Works Consulting. Next slide. So the public and stakeholder involvement that is planned. So on the public, next slide, please. On the public outreach side, there's 3 in-person meetings scheduled, one in Phoenix, one in Flagstaff, and then there's one in Tucson on May 7th at the Ramada by Wyndham. There will be a virtual statewide meeting, public meeting, if there's anybody that can't make those in-person meetings on May 9th. And then tribal consultation meetings are available upon request by the tribes to the project team. And then the feedback collection via virtual comment from the map-based function through email, phone, mail methods, and then the time frame for the input will be in April and May. So next slide. So then on the stakeholder side, again, there's going to be 3 in-person only meetings on the stakeholder side, again in Phoenix, Flagstaff, and in Tucson. Tucson on May 7th. So we'll have the stakeholder meeting at the same location from 1 to 3:30 in Tucson. And then the public meeting will be followed that evening at that same location. And then there will also be a virtual statewide meeting for the stakeholders who can't attend in person. That'll be on May 14th. And again, the stakeholder is intended for local agency, tribal technical staff, elected officials, and nonprofits. At the stakeholder meetings, we'll discuss both projects, the background, the purpose, review the safe system approach that's going to be used in both projects, and obtain input on safety concerns and potential strategies. And then also during these meetings is the opportunity to sign up to participate in one of the HSP emphasis area teams. And again, those were the human behavior, the intersections, lane departure, vulnerable road users, and tribal. So next slide. So the next steps. So identifying local champions. I've provided to our project team, to the stakeholder list, everybody, all TPC members. So you may have already received an email on the stakeholder meetings to register for those. If there's anybody else that from your jurisdictions that you feel could provide input on these important projects, you can email myself and provide that to me, and I can pass that along to make sure that they're informed on that. Attend the safety workshops. If you can't attend them, then at least participate through the virtual meetings. And then also, if you can, participate in one or more of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan emphasis area teams. And again, encourage the general public to attend the public meetings. And then in, I think, September timeframe, ADOT will be looking for obtaining letters of support for the priorities and strategies that are developed, and getting your support for those priorities and strategies. So, next slide. Any questions? And then the last slide is just the identifies the ADOT project managers for both projects, and then the consultant contact at Kimley Horn. So if there's any questions, I'll try to answer, or we can, if I can't, we'll be sure to get back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. Are there any questions for Mark on this topic? Jose first, and then Paul.
Mark, you mentioned somewhere that you want to reduce that by 20% by 2030. What are the repercussions or consequences if we don't hit that 20% mark?
I mean,
we've been getting this done for most of them. We're trying to, how do we reduce it? It seems like it's going the other way around.
Right. Yeah. That is the goal. It's following the goal of the governor's office, and if we don't meet that, I think it's just important that this is a continual process. And granted, we are going in the wrong direction on fatalities and serious injuries, but it's the importance of why we need to continually to update these plans and come up with new strategies and priorities on how to get this going in the right direction. Other than what the repercussions of not meeting it, I think it's a continuous process of working towards that goal and coming up with strategies to get it going in the right direction.
Thanks, Mark. So one last question: who are the vulnerable users? Road users?
Those are the pedestrians and bicyclists.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But it seems like there's a lot of vulnerable users like that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Mark. Thanks for the update. So considering the shift back to the name of Strategic Highway Safety Plan, can you share with us what network will the SHSP be looking at, and what network will the ATSAP be looking at? Are you looking at all roadways within Arizona, or are you looking at ADOT-owned facilities? I know there's been a different approach from year to year, or throughout the years rather. So I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. So, Mr. Chair, committee members, Paul. So the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, since it's a policy document and it includes all stakeholders across the state, it's all facilities. On the Active Transportation Safety Action Plan, that is the goal there is to identify actual projects and cost. So those are limited to the state highway system under the ATSAP.
And so just to follow up with the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, I know that there was an executive committee established at some point that was limited to state and federal agencies. Since you're looking all the way down to the local level, will there be any refreshing of that executive committee, and will it include any local agency representation? And maybe you don't know.
Yeah, and I don't have that answer, Paul, but I can pass that along and get an answer for you.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mark?
Mark?
Go ahead, Jeanette.
Hi, Mark, this is Jeanette. I just have a quick question in regards to our tribal partners participating. If they want to set up a meeting with the project team, should they reach out to you or to Dan? What's the best way they can do that?
They should reach out directly to Dan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Maisa from EDA. Actually, I had the pleasure actually to participate in the executive committee meeting. And the way the strategic highway safety plan will be performed going forward will be using the total system approach, which means not only roadway, we're not only looking at roadway, but also looking at like street transportation, looking at geometric design, looking at all the elements that would involve the total system. And I know from previous research, the fatal and serious injuries are probably in the 80% on the behavioral side and only 88% actually, and 12% on the engineering side. So that means when you want to correct the behavioral side, you have to look at enforcement and education. And when you look at the engineering side, this is where the design should come to play. And going back to your question, Paul, this is applied the highway safety improvement program applies to all roadways, not only the state highway. So we are doing the best we can to move the needle to reduce the fatal injuries and if you look at the trend all over US, it's going rise. It's not just in Arizona. It's everywhere in all the states, not just Arizona. So I know the director office and the state engineer office, they are both working hard to do the best we can to reduce injuries and fatal crashes. So, and we really are looking for a good participation from all our safety organizations to help make that happen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those comments. And I think as transportation professionals, we all share that goal of improving safety for all of our users. And so I'll make sure definitely that representatives from the city of Tucson are participating, and I hope that you all do the same. All right. Any other questions or comments before we wrap this item up? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Mark, for that presentation. Before we move on to item 7, I'm going to take a bit of chair's privilege here to provide some context at why 7, 8, and 9 are on the agenda. Hopefully, many of you listened in to the PAG Regional Council meeting in which these items were discussed at great length by the Regional Council, including my representative on the council. There has been a lot of conversation about the carbon reduction program, at this level as well as at the Regional Council, about just the concern over the participation of the committees and how those funds were going to be spent. I know that our committee made several requests to discuss this item, and we were not able to on many occasions. So this is our opportunity to provide some direct comments on these 3 items. I do want to take a moment and just read what the motion was from the Regional Council to kind of set the stage on the discussion we're about to take place. The actual motion was, I move that we table items 6, 7, and 8 until our May meeting, and that at the May meeting that we not only get a report from the executive director on how these items tie in with the carbon reduction plan, but that in between now and then, all 3 of those committees, which we're referring to EPAC, AQS, and this committee, be briefed on all 3 of these items and offer their own recommendations as to how they tie in with the carbon reduction plan. So we will hear presentations from staff on each item, 7, 8, and 9. We'll go, in order, and I encourage you all to provide your feedback. We'll take time after each presentation to make sure that any questions are answered and that you can provide that feedback. So that way, when this item does fall back on the Regional Council agenda, that our representatives on the Regional Council have sufficient information to make a decision. So with that, we will move on to item 7, briefing and discussion on the orthophoto feature extraction effort. Mead Meyer? That's right. All right. Thank you, Mead.
You're well burned now. Okay. And the whole this work is too loud. So as Sam said, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the first of the 3 projects. It's the smallest of the 3. I'll explain for you what the ortho feature extraction is in case that's very jargony language for you. And this is your opportunity to provide early feedback on the benefits and the use of using this data for mapping active transportation infrastructure. We'd really like, we've built into the process in the proposed scope of work to get your feedback as well to drive the outcome and approach of the project. So many of you, I guess I don't have a computer. Can we?
Other side.
So many of you know me in my past role, which is relevant today. I was the watershed planning manager. And I met many of you through that role where we overlap our watershed planning work with transportation through our green infrastructure work. Over the last decade, we've been working on a green infrastructure prioritization tool. And this project today is relevant to that. I'm really excited about this project because this is data we've been looking forward to creating when money was available for over 10 years. And also the last 5 years, we've been getting feedback on such data through the SoundCloud effort and working with our regional data working group. Now I'm in a role that brings you this project in another capacity. I'm now a planning manager over both the GIS department and watershed planning. Apologize. I have a cold and I'll wear my mask. So next up, what we'll go through today is examples of the data and the uses so that you understand how this project is defined better, the timeline and scope of work within the consultant's proposal, and your feedback, just like on the other 2 projects that you can hear. I wanted to add a personal note that I've worked at PAG for 18 years now, and I've seen many changes over time. And I really believe that one thing that we consistently do well is enabling data-driven decision making. And so this is a project in that vein. And it helps to direct planning to areas of need when we have limited resources. I also want to make sure it's clear that this is separate from our orthophotography program. Just last fall, we acquired regional orthophotography, which is the regional aerial photography that you'll see like on the Pima County maps and throughout the region. This is a separate project from that. But it utilizes those data that just came in and are being delivered to our jurisdictions. What this is what's proposed is a machine learning process through a consultant. They have a very unique way, cutting edge, for detecting and delineating certain feature types within the infrastructure. So instead of it just showing a map of where the footprints of each building street are, it actually puts them into polygons with feature types and descriptions. What you see on the board is an example, a pilot test that was done on the U of A by the company Ecopia. And I believe we have a few of their employees online that might be able to answer additional questions later. So some examples of the features that will be extracted relevant to active transportation are sidewalks, bike lanes, medians, driveways, edge of pavement, building footprints, grass, pervious areas, parking lots, tree canopy, through lanes, turning lanes. And then the attributes I mentioned are width, paint, whether it's a painted feature, whether it's raised, whether it's vegetated, whether it has impervious space within the median or right of way. So when additional feature, those additional features such as the vegetation and impervious are an add-on that we would not be able to do without these carbon reduction funds, which is the purpose. I should say it's permissible to utilize those funds for shade and safety amenities to encourage active modes of transportation and to encourage the climate resiliency features. The way that Ecopia describes it is 4 categories of data. 3D buildings, bridges, and vegetation is 1. Transportation features, advanced transportation features, advanced impervious features, and 2D land cover. So rather than have this in raster data, like an orthophoto, it's in vector data, which is those polygons, if you're familiar with GIS. Those are the enable analysis. That's the huge step that PAG staff has not been able to take. We've been able to do small efforts that pilot it or 1 feature at a time by hand. But this is a huge data set for the whole region. The reason the polygons are important, the attributes is in the past, when we were able to do small one-off polygons, those were utilized across the region and not only within planning, but resulted in implementation of projects. They were used in the active, the city's latest bike plan. I think it was an active plan. And so that's just an example of how they get utilized. Okay. Now speaking about the benefits and uses. As I said, there's some data available around the region, but this would allow more consistency, more complete, more up-to-date, and more detailed data than we have across the region. We know, since we have a regional clearinghouse of data, where the gaps are in data, we'd like to fill those in to be able to assess where the infrastructure gaps are. This is feasible now at a lower cost than it has been before due to these emerging technologies I mentioned. So it will fit into the timeline of incorporating it into the active modes transportation plan that was approved in January. And as I said before, these were done by hand and exploratory tests. And in the end, the uses will include each member jurisdiction will be provided the data for their own use. Internally, they'll lead toward using the active modes plan and then the RMAP thereafter, which I'm rather excited about because that means the CRP funds are being institutionalized into our process, making a long-term impact. And by doing gap assessments of infrastructure, once you have the data, that could lead to uses such as connectivity analysis, and looking for areas of greatest need by overlaying it with other important demographic data, pedestrian demand data, vulnerable user facilities, and the like. If you look in your packet at the end of the scope of work for this project, there's also some examples of the story maps put together by Ecopia, where other cities have used this for their climate resilience projects, such as Houston. So looking at the timeline, as I said, we rely on our subject matter experts across the region. This is a rather integrated planning topic, so we want to bring people together to inform the project. Within there's starts with a large workshop to get feedback, and then several other phases where we request peer review of the data, and where we share the data, and then we ask again for advice on the utilization of the data so that it helps ensure it does get put to use by those to make sure that people know it's available as well. I have heard some feedback already about uses such as Tucson Water might be able to use it to help decrease turf along our roadways where there's excess use of water. And just to give you some more examples of past uses, we have our PAG green infrastructure prioritization tool, which was utilized to make the goals, the measurable goals for the 1 Million Trees campaign, to provide an equity approach for that effort. And Tucson Beautiful utilizes that map for their outreach to the most vulnerable, heat-vulnerable populations. So that's why I'm very excited about these next steps. It would enhance those and grow those in a way we've been able to grow the green infrastructure planning efforts bit by bit over time, but this would be a big leap. So now, we're at the place in the timeline where it hasn't been approved yet. For our consultant, it has been approved in the OWP, but we would like your feedback on the benefits and uses. And I could take any questions on your project, and those will be transmitted. I want to note one more thing about the timeline, that if this is voted on before the end of the fiscal year, the funding for this fiscal year is available for this project. So it would have to be entirely rescoped for a different budget beyond that point. That's all I have.
Thanks so much, Mead. In the packet, it says it lists the scope of work, task, fee, and schedule. I didn't see the fee. Can you tell me how much the value of this contract is?
Yes. We in the OWP, $113,000 was allocated, and the consultant proposed a fee of $284,472.
What was the first number? 413?
413 and then 284.
Do you know what happens to that remaining dollar value? It seems that the contract came in under budget. What happens to that difference?
In my experience, we've tended to have a vote that all the funds could be assigned to that category. So like the regional council agenda might put the 413 agenda amount on there, so that we can increase it as needed. So if you wanted to add on to the project, it would be easier to expand it. If it was voted on less, that would take an OWP change. We'd have to work through a different process.
All right, I'll open it up to my colleagues for questions. I may chime in along the way, but I'll open it up to the floor. So who wants to go first? Catherine?
Well, I have a question piggybacking on what you asked about the funding shown in the OWP. So It's always challenging trying to decipher the OWP and crosswalk it. But to me, it looked like for fiscal year 24, which we're in, there was only $275,000 for data extraction. So it sounds like we're really looking at obligating this year and next year's funding in totality. Is there a reason why we can't just do the current year's 275 and then we would have the next year to look at other uses of the carbon reduction program if this contract itself only needs a portion of the funding? And I think that seems more like a overarching, how does the OWP work? So I don't know, Jamie, if you're better suited or Jeanette.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Ms. Skinner. So the regional council approved a 2-year work program. And so the funds are approved for both fiscal years. And we do have some flexibility to carry forward funds into the second year of the OWP. And my understanding is we can also draw from those second year funds. But I don't know if Mark Hoffman, if you wanted to elaborate on that, that was my understanding.
Yep. Mr. Chair, committee members. So the work program, it's a 2-year work program that's approved. But you're limited to the funding available to authorize funding within what's available on your current federal aid ledger, being your current year is fiscal year 24. So you're limited to the funding that is included on your current federal aid ledger under that funding program. And when you're ready to proceed with a project, at that time, then you can request authorization of the funding up to what is included in your approved work program. As I said, limited to the available funding on your current year federal aid ledger. So then as the 2-year work program was approved, but then when you transfer from federal fiscal year 24, then when you hit 25, then your 25 funding becomes available. And then you have to request based on your projects and your approved work program, then you would request authorization of that of your 25 funding based on your approved work program.
Thanks, Mark.
Did that answer your question, Catherine?
Pretty confused. I mean, I'll be honest. It looks like there was 1.6 million of carryover carbon reduction program last year for this fiscal year. But the OWP for fiscal year 24 shows $275,000 for this specific data extraction task. So Mark, on their ledger, this is where we don't have access, at least easily, to the ledger to understand, like, the overall work program seems like we should only be looking at 275, but that we're really obligating next year's as well. So I'm clearly missing something.
Well, Mr. Chair, committee members, so the in PAGS in the fiscal year 24 work program, they have a budget amount that they've got dedicated to their work program. That amount is in the approved work program, and then they have in the section where they identify the projects, they have an estimated cost of what that project is anticipated to be. So they can request authorization up to the amount of funding that is included in their approved work program.
Okay.
Per year. And when that funding becomes available in that federal fiscal year. So it's based on the funding that is approved in their work program, in their budget table, and then the project is line itemed out using consultant services and an estimated cost for that project. But their work program is approved based on that budget table and the amount of funding that they plan to that they can go up to request authorization.
Okay, so the projects where they line itemed their planned uses of the carbon reduction program funding can change or vary in value as long as they don't exceed the total amount that was allocated for
That-
ERP in this fiscal year.
That's correct.
Would it preclude a change of the project itself? So are we tied just to the budget line item, which was the 1.6 carryover and the 2.3 for fiscal year 24? Are we tied to the way it was spelled out in the project list, or are we just tied to the funding amount in total?
If I may, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, I mean, yeah, so the regional council approved the tables in the overall work program that include these line item amounts for these various projects that are specifically listed in table 6 and have CRP program listed as the funding source. So Mark, you can feel free to expand, but I mean, I think that would require some sort of amendment process to make changes to what's listed in the regional council approved every.
Do you agree, Mark?
Yes, if you're adding, say you're adding a new project to your work program, then yes, then that would require a work plan amendment.
Okay. Okay, that was helpful.
Got it. Other questions for Mead on this topic?
I have, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So last meeting, which I wasn't at, and I think it ties back to the January regional council meeting, the active transportation modes plan was approved. So how does this data extraction and that planning effort work together? Do they work together? Is the timing important in terms of the sequencing? Because they seem very related to me.
Yeah. So in summer, they need the data by July to utilize it in the effort for the active transportation plan. There are ways to integrate the data later, but that would fit their current timeframe. You can see it listed under you see it's kind of small, but it says 4.3 for the ATP.
To piggyback on that, I'm just curious, why wasn't the data extraction part of the contract for the active transportation plan? Why is this a separate effort from that?
Well, they're different expertises.
Other questions?
It's a pretty unique contractor that we found.
So, Mr. Chair, I haven't really committed the scope of work for the active transportation plan to memory, but I guess I'm a little surprised that there's not an active modes infrastructure identification baseline and recommendations of infill step within that, within the $600,000 budget for an active transportation plan. It seems a bit strange to me that it wouldn't fit in that scope and that it has to be an add-on to get that feature extraction out of the orthophotography. I get the concept and it makes a lot of sense, but I'm also at a loss of why it wasn't incorporated into the scope of work. If you're doing an active transportation plan, inventorying your network, I would expect you would have that as one of your core steps. And it seems to be that the inventorying of the network is relying on this effort in order to get that work identified so that you can take the next step of selecting where there are gaps in the network. So that's a comment more than anything.
And we consider that they are in that active transportation plan, the consultants are gathering all the data across the region that is currently available. So they are doing a gap assessment, and then this will add on to that to complete where there's data gaps. And then the active transportation consultant is looking for infrastructure gaps thereafter. So this is filling in data gaps, which is a separate technical effort.
Thank you, Mead. Other questions for Mead? Natalie?
So this is the second time that I'm addressing these issues. These were brought, as you said, to the EPAC committee, which was consolidated with the air quality subcommittee meeting earlier this week or last week. And I'm the chair of the air quality subcommittee. I was the chair of EPAC. And I feel that all of these items, I had a number of questions at EPAC that I had addressed by PAG staff. So I'm not going to ask those questions again. But I do just want to state clearly for the record my thoughts about using carbon reduction program funds for these projects, all three of them actually. And I think it's important to really understand from the FHWA guidance document on the carbon reduction program what was expected of the use of these funds. And so when you look at the program purpose, the purpose of the carbon reduction program is to reduce transportation emissions through the development of state carbon reduction strategies and by funding projects designed to reduce transportation emissions. Later on in the document, it lists out items that describe those projects, those types of projects. And these types of projects definitely do not align with what is outlined within this guidance document. First, they really should be projects, and it states within the document multiple times that the funds should be used specifically for projects. We know that these aren't projects because they were extracted from the tip because they're plants. So that is problem number one. The other problem is that they do not reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation system. I do think that these projects have value in a lot of different ways, and that I can see why PAG wants to do them. But I don't believe that it is a worthy use of carbon reduction program funds when we are specifically being asked by the federal government to use these funds for eligible activities that are projects, and they're very specific in their documentation about the types of projects. And I really don't even know what you could point to within this guidance document that would demonstrate that this funding falls in line with any of those eligible activities. I do understand that these were approved within ADOT's strategic planning document. I still argue the same thing. I also have a really big problem with the fact that there is guidance in here on the consultation and coordination aspects, and it specifically states that the state and MPO must also use their documented public involvement process, including their process for seeking out and considering the needs of those traditionally underserved by existing transportation systems, such as low-income and minority households who may face challenges accessing employment and other services. This was decided not even with any input from the jurisdictions, much less low-income communities. There was no public process, zero. There would have been maybe a little bit if they stayed within the tip, but they were extracted from the tip. And therefore, there's been no public process. There's been no process in which jurisdictions could provide input on the types of projects that they wanted to see these funds used for. So PAG did decide on their own that this was the best use of funds. They went through the process, and here we are today deciding on that. And so I just want to state specifically for the record that I do not support these projects, and I do not believe they are a good use of these funds.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm going to piggyback on that. I do echo some of what Natalie said, because one of my questions was going to be very specifically, Mead, how do you see this data extraction process reducing carbon in our community? Because I think that's been a major concern of our representative on the regional council, and I have to report back to her. And so I'd like to understand how you see this process addressing that concern.
First of all, thank you for your research, your passion and dedication to this. I do believe our feedback responses could be more informed based on your questions and points. Provide more information back to regional council about where we saw the alignment. And for the actual carbon reductions, we saw planning as an eligible activity. So once you have data like this that helps direct it to areas of need for the pedestrians and bikes, it encourages usage. Like there are other research studies that show that encourages bikes when they're more safe, right? So this goes into the planning phase, and then we are directed to incorporate it into our plans, so our institutionalized plans like the RMAP. So that's the phase in which you could ensure that it gets utilized for selection of projects that's above my level.
I can add, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
President, Air Quality Manager, PAG. So you can see kind of a pattern of what our CRP funds have been put toward, and that's enhancing alternative modes of transportation to reduce carbon. So getting people into active modes use, mode shift and transit. So in the packet for the meeting today, we tried to explain that. So one of the lines is, increasing zero emission active modes use as a more widely used means of transportation in our region will translate to impactful carbon reductions, congestion mitigation, and improved air quality. So that's the message. There's a lead off, for carbon reduction strategies overview with all these projects being programmed in the overall work program, which was put forth before this council, this committee, management committee meeting. And so the projects were identified and the funds allocated, and those were approved by EDOT, FHWA, and FTA in terms of the connection to the carbon reduction. But yeah, to answer the question of how will this translate to carbon reductions, enhancing mode shift and promoting mode shift and understanding the data, that's what translates into carbon reductions.
Before I go on to the questions here, I just want to note that we were, as a committee, we were actually not allowed to comment on the OWP. Well, let me back up. We did provide comments, but we weren't allowed to discuss it, especially the use of the carbon reduction program fund. We were not allowed to discuss the use of those. That was approved by management committee and regional council with my representative voting no on that. Just wanted to note that for the record. I'm going to go down the line here with Natalie first and Paul and Catherine.
Thank you, Mr.
Go
Chair.
ahead, Natalie.
I appreciate that. I just want to follow up on that. I understand what you're saying with respect to the planning, that it's leading to alternate mode usage. But if you look at the guidance document for this funding, it says the word project over and over and over again. And I believe the intention of these funds is not to plan for something that might result in carbon reduction. It's to plan it in lieu of looking at the bike lanes with your extraction tool. It would be to build more bike lanes or to provide safety features that make biking safer. So more people feel comfortable biking, or building more sidewalks. Those types of things, I believe, is the intention of this funding. And so you've taken work that I think that you all want to do for good reason, and you're using funds that I don't believe is appropriate for the work that you want to do. So that is the reason why I don't support it. I would much rather see more sidewalks built, more bike lanes built, more shade for transit users. And I think that would have more of an impact quicker. And frankly, with this topic, the reason that we're receiving these funds is because we have a serious problem. We just experienced the hottest summer on record. It could be the coolest summer we ever experienced for the rest of our lives. Let's think about that. We need to move quickly. We can't be dilly-dallying around trying to figure out what the plans are when we know what will make people get on a bike is to just feel safer. So if we can just build those features within our system to do that quicker, I think we'll have more impact quicker.
Thank you, Natalie.
Well, thanks for your comment. Just wanted to add, in reference to the implementation guidance of federal highways on the carbon reduction program. I'm just reviewing section G, eligibilities and coordination requirements. Section 3 is eligible activities. Item H, a project or strategy designed to support congestion pricing, shifting transportation demand to non-peak hours for other transportation modes, increasing vehicle occupancy rates, or otherwise reducing demand for roads, including electronic toll collection and travel demand management strategies and programs.
So I think, and thanks for that. And before I go on to Paul, I'm sure that we can all sit around here and argue the interpretation of the implementation of these funds. I think getting back to the core issue, at least that was addressed by some of the members at Regional Council and many members of this committee, is that there should have been more conversation and input from the regional jurisdictions on how we program and use these CRP funds. Fundamentally, they were included in the OWP on many tasks that were already funded by other funding sources prior to CRP, without any conversation or discussion with the region on how we want to use those funds. And I think that gets back to Natalie's point, is that perhaps as a region, many of us would have rather seen these funds translate into actual infrastructure being built, or perhaps more transit service, or these tangible benefits to the region, to our community members, versus some of these more abstract planning efforts. While they may have merit and they may have some value, there were just never an opportunity for us to have that conversation and provide that feedback. So I just want to make sure we kind of level set there before we move on. I'm going to go to Paul, then Catherine, and then Heidi. Go ahead, Paul.
I'll just keep a brief comment here. Mead, you kind of mentioned that the how the strategy becomes actualized is through, inclusion into an RMAP and planning. Yet it's been clarified for us here that the active modes plan and the current RMAP that is underway will not be able to incorporate the active modes outcomes into the RMAP. So it behooves me to understand how this is going to result in projects identified in the RMAP that are already identified in the RMAP until 4 or 5 years from now when we do the next RMAP. So to invest so much in limited resources of carbon reduction program funding into a planning activity that we're likely not to see any project identification fruits from for 4 to 5 years, upon which there may not be any more carbon reduction program funding to do implementation activities, just seems like a strangely backward way to do planning to realize projects for funding that may not be there by the time we identify projects.
Oh, Catherine.
That's it.
I'm sorry, me, did you want to respond?
Oh, well, if I'm not interrupting, we'll use yours and add on.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to mention that in addition to use for PAG's efforts, there's just a reminder that the jurisdictions will have the data available to them as well for prior efforts, whether it's a tree campaign or a other way of directing other available funds. But when it comes to how it's incorporated into RMAP, I can't answer that as much as Jeanette, because she knows about the performance measures, and Dustin, who knows about the overall. When you're asking budget questions, he understands where the pot of money is at this time.
Thank you, Mead. That's totally fair and accurate, and it would help us improve the way that we identify those needs. But I can tell you, we've got a list of implementation eligible activities for bicycle routes and infill sidewalk projects and all sorts of stuff that were not ever part of the consideration process. So the consultation process that Natalie mentioned, I don't think that it was necessarily followed in the spirit of the CRP implementation guidance that said consult with stakeholders and the public to determine the best use of the CRP funding. That was done on behalf of member jurisdictions and stakeholders by PAG management. And that's what we're here today, is to react to that decision that's already been made. So it's kind of a strange place to be, to provide input on something that we were asking for input on when the decision was being made after the decision has been made. I'll leave it at that for now.
Catherine? And then Heidi.
Yeah, continuing to piggyback, I would say, maybe this has been set in stone. We're using the funds in that way, and I understand the explanation of it being in the OWP. But what I'm hearing loud and clear is there's going to be more money, and we want an opportunity to have conversations before it's in a published OWP with limited comment period by this body, because we should know enough through all these planning efforts to know how we can implement either encouragement, because just understanding microtransit is not an encouragement campaign. It's a plan that's on a shelf. Just like data extraction is great data, until you put it into practice and deliver something, it has not reduced any carbon. So that's the one thing. And the second item, the institutionalizing and data driven and getting into the RMAP. This is a challenge we faced as we've talked about safety historically as well. And I think this is similar, where you have the trends are going the wrong way. There's a desire to get them going in the right direction. That's what a performance measure is for. So we understand the projects that we're funding, but we've been told that regional council has not provided direction that performance measures should be used as a part of project selection. So I would recommend, since it is regional council asking us for some input, is that if we want to institutionalize this and change the way we do project selection, there needs to be a performance measure. And that needs to be a part of decision-making on all future TIP documents, RMAPs, whatever the effort is. Otherwise, I really do feel it'll just be a planning document on the shelf without much teeth or any real impactful infrastructure.
Just a quick correction at the risk of correcting my boss. We're not sure if there's gonna be more money, to be frankly honest with you. Like, there's been $6.4 million encumbered of the carbon reduction program funds that are coming to this region for carbon reduction program implementation and the reduction of carbon emissions. We anticipate that the total is going to be around $11 million. So hopefully we'll see the second half of that funding be opened up and available for actual implementation projects. But it seems like an awful large investment to make for planning activities to inform things that we're ready to go. We know a lot of implementation activities that could really benefit from this funding and could actually reduce carbon. Sorry to interrupt.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Heidi?
Thank you. I just wanted to go on the record too to say that I disagree with Natalie and what she was saying, because it is truly an interpretation. And I do agree with Dustin's interpretation of how this was all going to go. I don't think everything is vetted in this little vessel, that nobody has any input on any of this. I believe with all the committees that we have here at PAG, we're taking their data and their input and then acting on it. I think good planning also produces good projects. So I think planning is also the first phase. So extracting some of this information for us to utilize in the future would be something I think that would be good for all of us. I don't think we should just, oh, we need sidewalks. Oh, we need another bike lane. So throw it in. But does it warrant it? Is it in the right location? That requires planning. So I just wanted to put that out there on the record.
Thank you, Heidi.
So there, I echo the same thing too. I mean, we do planning for everything. Before we do any type of project, we want to, it's just a project, first of all. So there's always got to be some ahead of the project itself. I understand you guys want to see most of these funds go to construction, which is great. However, we wonder, was this going to work? I mean, we've been dealing with fatalities in the roadways for a long time. We got all this money we're going into. Yeah, we're going the wrong direction. Yeah, we're going to do some more planning. Are we doing something wrong? Same thing applies to this. Okay, or the gaps. We just recently did a RTAG funding there. There's a lot of need for pedestrians out there, multimodal. Most of us don't know where that, until you guys actually come to the table. I got this from this, but it'd be nice to have something like this where you can actually see where the gaps are. Well, I'm in favor of this. I don't see nothing wrong with this, with planning. And eventually, I mean, $11 million, that's a lot of money too, but how much sidewalk and bicycle lanes are you gonna get with $11 million? Let's face it, with the federal laws, you're not gonna get very much. But if we have a plan, a regional plan, not just Pima County or city, because I know you guys do a lot of planning, we don't. So we looked towards the PAG for some of this. So when even like for traffic bond, we can go out there. We don't have a traffic engineering. We just take that. We actually look towards PAG for this kind of data. So when I see this, like, okay, well, that's pretty much in line with the carbon reduction. Would I like to see sidewalks and bike lanes? Absolutely. But this is our first step.
Appreciate it. Any other comments for me because we do need to move on to the next item? Any online?
If you do have any additional feedback on the technical aspects of the project, we are welcoming early feedback on that.
Great. Thank you so much. We hope you feel better. We'll move on to item 8, briefing and discussion on the Dollar Ride and Micro Transit Service Area. This is Preston McLaughlin. Preston.
Good morning. Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Are y'all able to hear me all right? Or do I need to? Right. So yeah, today I will be discussing the Dial Ride and Micro Transit Service Area Analysis Project. In place of Hannah Oden, who's the lead on this project, who's unable to attend today. In this presentation, we'll just be covering some background information and overview of the project, as well as key components and a timeline for when implementation will be occurring. So to provide a little background, PAG is the region's designated metropolitan planning organization and FTA's designated transit planning agency. And PAG is responsible for studying and identifying transit service needs and opportunities for service expansion. Dollar Ride and Micro Transit Service are a key factor in reducing carbon emissions and improving air quality in the PAG region, providing alternatives to single occupancy vehicle travel in areas that are currently not served by a fixed route transit system like a bus. A Dollar Ride Microtransit Service Area Analysis is included in PAG's overall work program, OWP, states that PAG can evaluate any opportunities to improve existing service and establish new microtransit service areas when practical. In terms of the Dollar Ride Microtransit Service Area Analysis, this is an effort consistent with the approved FHWA, ADOT, and regional council planning activities to incorporate IIJA mandated carbon reduction emphasis in refining our public transportation planning processes. And data from this analysis will be used in the development of PAG's Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan, or RMAP, to establish transit expansion areas, as well as meeting the objectives of the carbon reduction compliance with federal requirements. And just to provide a brief overview to compare the similarities and differences of what general public dollar ride is and what micro transit is. In terms of the general public dollar ride, which we currently offer in the region, this does provide shared curb-to-curb rides within multiple zones in Pima County. However, riders do need to make reservations in advance, generally 24 hours in advance or maybe a little later to book a trip. And these trips, the vast majority of these trips are booked by phone. It is not a fixed route transit service like a traditional bus. And with microtransit, similarly, it is an on-demand shared public transit service. It does provide curb-to-curb rides. Some of the key differences are that trips are booked, can be booked the same day, and more emphasis on booking trips through a mobile application versus phone. And again, it's not a fixed route transit service. So it does provide curb-to-curb service, and it traditionally uses smaller vehicles. So some of the key components of this project will be a comprehensive analysis of existing transit conditions in the region, including, like I mentioned, our existing current general public dial ride operations and mobility needs assessment to target areas and communities in the region where this service would be most beneficial. There will also be a feasibility analysis of transitioning our current dollar ride service to a micro transit style of transit service. There'll be identification of opportunity areas where new micro transit services could be implemented. There will also be an implementation plan for potential new micro transit service areas, and also looking at ways in which we can improve our current booking system for riders who are booking trips. Final recommendations for this project or plan will be provided to all transit service providers in the region. And there will be continuous public outreach and engagement events and activities, information throughout the life of this project. Additionally, PAG was awarded a statewide transit planning grant from ADOT that is going to be used specifically to look at the transit feasibility in the communities of Picture Rocks and Vale. Communities of Picture Rocks and Vale. And this will also be included within the scope of this microtransit project. And just for general timelines, it is anticipated that this project will be completed by April or May of 2025, so approximately a year from now. And again, throughout the course of this project, there will be committee updates and presentations, as well as public engagement events during the key stages of this project timeline. Yeah, so with that, I'll be happy to try and answer any questions you may have. Again, Hannah is the lead, but I do have knowledge of these services, so I will do my best to answer any questions at this time.
Great, thank you very much, Preston. I think you sort of alluded to this. So you talked about transit service or this results being shared with all transit service providers. How will the connection between Suntran and Sunvan be figured into this study?
So yeah, I'm hoping, and I believe I would have to look at the scope of work again, but there should be connections and regular input during our meetings with our consultant, Kimley Horn. Whenever we are making these decisions, we are going to be working with local jurisdictions to determine, where the services will be most beneficial. And again, that's for the entire region. So we will be bringing in and discussing this project in more detail along the way throughout the course of the project with representatives from Suntran and Sunvan and the town of Oro Valley and any other jurisdictions would like to participate in this project and determining where the best locations are and communities to look at, and how existing either dial-a-ride or on-demand services, because I know Suntran does have their own on-demand service, how we can make those services more efficient.
And then my last question, again, I didn't see it in the material. What's the cost for this contract?
Yeah, so I don't have an exact number on hand. So I might have to defer to either Jeanette or Jamie on that. I believe the total contract is $900,000, but $250,000 of those funds is coming from that ADOT awarded grant.
Thank you. Questions for Preston? Paul?
Can you ballpark how many dial-a-ride and microtransit users we have today, and what portion of the total transit users are they?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we currently, at least Sun Shuttle, so at the RTA, we have 4 separate general public dial-a-ride service areas. There's one in Oro Valley, which the town of Oro Valley oversees. There's a service area in Ajo, so Western Pima County. And then there's a service area in the Avra Valley Marana area and the Sahuarita Green Valley area. So those are the 4 general public dial-a-ride service areas we currently have. They fluctuate. I would say the Oro Valley dial-a-ride service area is the most popular. I would say close, maybe not half, but close to half of all public transportation trips in Oro Valley are, for that general public dial-a-ride. The Ajo service is very popular, especially that fares are still free. So I would say the Ajo service is second most popular, and there's no other services out there. So and on a monthly basis, we see 1,100 to 1,500 trips per month in Ajo, which is pretty good for a community of that size. And then the Green Valley Sahuarita would be our third most popular public dial-a-ride, and you see approximately 800 to 900 trips per month in that area. And then the Moran Valley is our least popular, but it is the only form of transportation for a lot of people out there. So it's a lifeline service for a lot of people who don't have other options. And so we see maybe 500 or 600 trips a month in that region as well. But yeah, and again, it's hard to compare because these are suburban rural areas that are low density, not the most conducive for public transportation. And that's why we have microtransit. It's because it is, it just makes more sense in these communities than a traditional fixed route bus service. So it's very popular in these regions. And again, I can't compare it to Suntran or their on-demand service because it's in the urban core of the city where there's more accessibility to transit. And it's easier for people to take public transit. But on a regional level, it is, I would say, a pretty popular service, and it depends on what region you're looking at.
So what I'm getting at is, it appears that the dial-a-ride service is a small fraction of the total transit usage. And I'm curious why the decision was made to go after that with a nearly $1 million study to reduce carbon. I guess that would be one of the goals, I'm assuming, of the study. When you're looking at such a small pool of users in comparison to the entire transit network, why was the entire transit network not targeted for an analysis of such a study to try to shift more trips? Some of the goals that we see under the strategies list for shifting from vehicle use to transit use. So I'm just a little curious why targeting such a small percentage of total transit users. That doesn't necessarily seem to be something that's going to result in a huge boon in carbon reduction. Which I guess that would be how you're trying to align the purpose of the study for the funding. So I'm just kind of curious about that, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would say it's layered. I would say a big component of this is equity. It has to do with regionality. We're looking at services where, yes, they're lower density, they're suburban, they're rural areas. They're just inherently not going to receive high ridership volumes just based on the geographic layout of those communities. But we are, as a regional planning agency, we're looking to provide some form of public transit to those communities that don't have anything. And so I would say that's a large reason for this study, is to look at and focus on those communities and not, ignore those communities that also need public transit, that live in areas that aren't
is there anyone is this meeting still going on? I think the meeting froze about 7 minutes ago.
Yeah, I just took a look and it looks like it disconnected from YouTube as well. So they just see this Zoom.
Yeah. Yep, same thing.
Same here.
I got out and went back in and it's the same thing, so.
I can try reaching out to one of our staff members and get an update and provide it to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our connection was lost and I can see that they're trying to reconnect. But I'll keep on trying to get some more information and let you know as soon as I know it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds like the internet is down in our office. They're still trying to work to reconnect, and I'll keep you apprised of the situation. But if you could, please just try to stay on a little bit longer and we'll try to get through this. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Sounds like they're still trying to work out this reconnection, and they're hoping to continue the meeting unless we happen to lose quorum. That's all I know for now, but I'll keep you updated as I find out more details.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
I just got an update from Zonia uh, that she believes that PEG lost their internet right now. They're trying to get it back up.
Thank you. As you can see, there's some activity going on. I just got a message from a staff member that the TPC is coming back into the room. So I would anticipate that we would start here shortly. So one of our staff members who is running this meeting says that if everyone online can please stay for quorum so we can resume when internet is back up, because we only have 4 for quorum in the room. If you have any concerns, let me know and I can try to communicate that back, but here's my update.
I'm sorry, David, I had to step away for a moment. I heard that you were giving a quick update. Is the meeting going to stop at this point, or are they going to resume it later?
What I hear from our tech person is that she wrote, if everyone online could please stay for quorum so we can resume when internet is back up. The reason is in the room, there's only 4 left for quorum, I suppose. So I think it's preferable if you can stay so we can keep the meeting going as soon as technology complies. But if you have any concerns, let me know and I'll try to communicate that back.
Okay, David. Yeah, definitely I can stay for quorum purposes. I have no problem with that.
Okay, thanks.
This is Patricia. I can stay as well.
Thanks, Patricia.
Hi, David. I'm sorry. I don't think I count towards quorum, and I have another meeting I need to go to. So I will need to leave.
Okay, thanks, Davida. Have a good day.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna need to drop off as well, David. This is Dan with Federal Highways. Thanks.
No problem. See ya. Okay, another update. It looks like we're still having trouble and we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So you're free to go.
I'm sorry, David, is the meeting now canceled at this point?
Yeah, it sounds like they decided to go ahead and adjourn it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.